Strategic transition, institutional learning and execution, the roadmap to a better Imo State. A documentary on governance, economic transformation, and the future of Imo State. Written by Dr. Nwodu Lawrence, development economist, Imo State, Nigeria. Every generation inherits a defining moment. A moment when the choices of today determine the prosperity of tomorrow. For Imo State, that moment is now. Billions have been invested in infrastructure. Policies have been introduced. Economic summits have been convened. Ambitious budgets have been announced. But history teaches us one simple truth. Great societies are not remembered for the promises they made. They are remembered for the institutions they built, the reforms they sustained, and the prosperity they created. So, as one political chapter gradually draws to a close, an important question emerges. Can Imo State transform today's achievements into tomorrow's lasting prosperity? From political transitions to strategic transitions. Political transitions happen every 4 or 8 years. Strategic transitions happen perhaps once in a generation. There is an important difference. A political transition simply changes those occupying public office. A strategic transition determines whether decades of investments continue to generate value or whether they gradually lose momentum. Across the world, the most successful economies have mastered this distinction. Singapore did not become one of the world's most competitive economies because of one administration. Dubai was not transformed by a single governor or ruler. China's remarkable economic rise did not occur because every new leadership started from scratch. Instead, each generation inherited a vision, improved it, expanded it, and handed it over stronger than it received it. Development became cumulative, not cyclical. Institutions became stronger than individuals. Policies became more durable than politics. That is the real lesson behind every successful economy. And perhaps it is also the most important lesson for every Nigerian state seeking long-term prosperity. Why this conversation matters now. Every administration eventually reaches a defining period, a time when the focus gradually shifts away from launching new initiatives and towards evaluating existing ones. This is not a period of weakness. It is a period of reflection. It is an opportunity to ask difficult but necessary questions. Which programs delivered measurable impact? Which investments generated the highest economic returns? Which reforms should continue? Which policies require adjustment? Which institutions deserve strengthening? Most importantly, how can today's achievements become tomorrow's foundation? These are not political questions. They are development questions. Because development is never measured by announcements alone. It is measured by outcomes. Roads reduce transport costs. Schools improve human capital. Hospitals strengthen productivity. Digital infrastructure attracts investors. Effective institutions create confidence. Every successful economy understands this relationship. Infrastructure without economic activity becomes underutilized. Policies without implementation remain aspirations. Budgets without measurable outcomes become accounting exercises. Execution is what transforms vision into prosperity. A defining moment for Imo State. Over the past several years, Imo State has witnessed significant investments in infrastructure, public services, security initiatives, and governance reforms. These efforts have sought to improve connectivity, strengthen public institutions, and create a more enabling environment for economic activity. Alongside these investments, strategic initiatives such as the Imo Economic Summit and the 2026 state budget signaled an ambition to position the state for long-term growth. They reflected a desire to engage stakeholders, attract investment, and articulate a broader development vision. But every society eventually reaches a point where an important shift must occur. The conversation can no longer focus solely on what has been announced. It must begin to focus on what has been achieved. That shift from aspiration to execution is where sustainable development truly begins. It is also where institutional learning becomes indispensable. Institutional learning means that governments do not merely complete projects. They evaluate them, understand what worked, identify what did not, and improve future decisions based on evidence rather than assumptions. This is how mature institutions evolve. They learn, they adapt, they improve. Over time, this process creates better policies, stronger public trust, and more effective governance. Without institutional learning, every new administration risks repeating the same mistakes. With it, every administration starts from a stronger position than the one before. From vision to execution. Around the world, governments regularly organize economic summits, investment forums, and policy conferences. These events serve important purposes. They communicate ambition. They build investor confidence. They attract partners. They create opportunities for collaboration. Yet global experience consistently demonstrates that the summit itself is never the destination. It is only the beginning. The true measure of success lies in what happens after the cameras are switched off. Are investment commitments converted into signed agreements? Are projects delivered on schedule? Are regulatory bottlenecks removed? Do investors encounter an efficient, transparent, and predictable business environment? Is there a dedicated institutional framework that follows every opportunity from initial interest to final implementation? These are the questions that separate successful investment destinations from those that struggle to convert interest into results. Execution, not publicity, is what drives transformation. Why this story extends beyond Imo State. Although this documentary focuses on Imo State, its central message resonates far beyond one state or one administration. Across Nigeria, many governments have unveiled ambitious development plans, launched infrastructure projects, and hosted investment forums. The enduring challenge has often been sustaining momentum through disciplined implementation, institutional continuity, and measurable outcomes. The broader lesson is that prosperity is rarely determined by the quantity of plans a government produces. It is shaped by the quality of execution, the resilience of institutions, and the ability to learn, adapt, and improve over time. That is why the themes of strategic transition, institutional learning, and execution matter, not only for Imo State, but for governance and public policy across Nigeria. Because lasting development is not built by isolated achievements. It is built by creating systems that allow each generation to build upon the work of the last. From vision to results, why execution determines the future of Imo State. The Imo Economic Summit, institutional learning, and the global lessons every government should understand. A great summit is only the beginning. Imagine walking into a room filled with investors, business leaders, academics, development experts, and government officials. Ideas are exchanged, partnerships are discussed, economic opportunities are presented. A bold vision for the future is unveiled. There is optimism, there is excitement, there is momentum. This is what every successful economic summit is designed to achieve. It creates a platform where ambition meets opportunities. It signals to the world that a government is thinking beyond the present and preparing for the future. But there is a reality that every successful economy has learned. A summit does not create prosperity. Execution does. The moment after the applause, when the closing ceremony ends, when the cameras are packed away, when the delegates return home, the real work begins. History rarely remembers the speeches. History remembers the outcomes. Did investors return? Were agreements transformed into viable projects? Did new industries emerge? Were jobs created? Did businesses experience a more predictable investment climate? Did ordinary citizens feel the impact through better opportunities and improved living standards? These questions define whether a summit becomes a turning point or simply another event on the calendar. Around the world, governments host investment conferences every year. Only a small number translate those gatherings into sustained economic transformation. The difference is almost never the quality of the speeches. It is the quality of the follow-through. The execution gap. Development economists often describe one of the greatest challenges in public administration as the execution gap. This is the distance between what governments intend to accomplish and what they ultimately deliver. It is where many well-designed policies lose momentum. Not because the ideas were weak, but because implementation was inconsistent. Execution requires institutions capable of tracking commitments, coordinating across ministries, resolving regulatory bottlenecks, engaging investors, and measuring progress against clear milestones. Without these systems, even the most ambitious plans can stall before delivering meaningful results. That is why many of the world's leading investment destinations have established permanent institutions dedicated to implementation rather than relying solely on periodic announcements. The original policy paper highlights the importance of structured investment facilitation, time-bound tracking, and cross-ministerial coordination to convert commitments into completed projects. Why institutional learning changes everything. Every successful organization asks one simple question after completing a major initiative. What did we learn? Governments should do exactly the same. Institutional learning is the process through which public institutions systematically evaluate policies, identify successes and shortcomings, and use those lessons to improve future decisions. This is not about assigning blame. It is about building capability. When institutional learning becomes part of governance, every completed project becomes a source of knowledge. Every policy becomes an opportunity for improvement. Every challenge strengthens future decision-making. This is how high-performing institutions evolve over time. The most effective governments are not those that never encounter difficulties. They are the ones that learn faster than others. They adapt. They refine. They continuously improve. That is why rigorous program evaluation is so important. Looking beyond compliance to assess outcomes, returns on public investment, and budget effectiveness helps governments calibrate future decisions and strengthen institutional performance. What the world's most successful economies teach us. Singapore skyline, Dubai's skyline, Rwanda's Kigali, Chinese high-speed rail. Although every country has its own unique history and political context, successful economies often share common development principles. Singapore, institutions before politics. Singapore's transformation was not driven by natural resources. It was driven by disciplined institutions, long-term planning, and a consistent commitment to execution. Successive administrations built upon earlier reforms instead of dismantling them. Policy continuity became a national strength. Rwanda, performance through accountability. Rwanda has emphasized long-term development planning, supported by performance monitoring and institutional accountability. Rather than treating plans as symbolic documents, implementation has been paired with measurable targets and regular evaluation. The lesson is clear. Plans create direction. Execution creates results. Dubai, building investor confidence. Dubai's rapid growth was supported by infrastructure, regulatory reform, and a relentless focus on creating an environment where investors could operate with confidence. The government understood that attracting investment required more than promotion. It required predictability. Investors commit capital where institutions are efficient, transparent, and responsive. China. Continuity over constant reinvention. China's economic transformation unfolded over decades through successive waves of reform. While policies evolved, each stage generally built upon earlier progress rather than restarting the development agenda. The continuity of long-term objectives allowed investments in infrastructure, manufacturing, education, and technology to compound over time. The hidden difference between successful governments, when people compare prosperous regions with struggling ones, they often focus on visible differences. Skyscrapers, industrial parks, technology hubs. These are important, but they are not the starting point. The real difference is usually invisible. It lies inside institutions. Successful governments create systems that continue functioning regardless of political transitions. They preserve institutional memory. They document lessons learned. They monitor implementation. They evaluate performance. They solve problems before they become crises. Most importantly, they understand that development is a continuous process, not a collection of isolated projects. That philosophy is especially important during periods of strategic transition.
From promises to performance. For any state aspiring to become a leading destination for investment, entrepreneurship, and innovation, credibility is built through consistent delivery. Investors do not evaluate only policy documents. They observe how efficiently projects move from approval to completion. They assess regulatory certainty. They examine institutional responsibility. They look for evidence that government commitments are honored. In other words, confidence grows when performance matches ambition. This is why the conversation surrounding the Imo Economic Summit should ultimately extend beyond the event itself. The more enduring question is how the ideas, partnerships, and aspirations generated through such initiatives can be translated into measurable economic outcomes that benefit citizens over the long term. A moment of opportunity. Every administration eventually reaches a crossroads. One path focuses on celebrating what has already been achieved. The other asks a more demanding question. How can today's achievements become tomorrow's foundation? That is the essence of institutional learning. It recognizes that development is not complete when a project is commissioned. It is complete only when its benefits are sustained, expanded, and built upon by those who follow. And that is precisely what makes strategic transition so important. Because the true legacy of leadership is measured not only by what it accomplishes during its tenure, but by how effectively it prepares the next generation to achieve even more. Unlocking Imo State's competitive advantage from potential to prosperity. How infrastructure, investment, human capital, and strategic execution can shape the next era of Imo State's development. Every great economy begins with potential. Every prosperous region in the world once existed only as a possibility. Before Singapore became a global financial hub, before Dubai became an international business gateway, before Shenzhen transformed into one of the world's leading technology centers, they all had one thing in common: potential. But potential alone has never built a thriving economy. Resources do not automatically create prosperity. Infrastructure does not automatically create jobs. Natural wealth does not automatically generate investment. Prosperity begins when leaders make deliberate choices to transform assets into competitive advantages. That is the challenge and the opportunity before Imo State today. Imo State's untapped economic strength. By almost every measure, Imo State possesses significant economic assets that could support long-term growth. Its strategic location links major commercial centers across the Southeast and South-South. It has a youthful and entrepreneurial population. It is home to universities and tertiary institutions that can help develop the skilled workforce required in a modern economy. The state also has agricultural resources, tourism potential, hydrocarbon reserves, natural gas opportunities, and an active diaspora capable of contributing capital, expertise, and global networks. These foundational strengths are highlighted throughout the policy paper as strategic assets for future development. These are not isolated advantages. Together, they form the building blocks of a diversified economy. The question is no longer whether these opportunities exist. The question is how they can be organized into a coherent strategy that delivers measurable results. The final question. As this documentary draws to a close, one question remains. Not for politicians alone, not for public officials, not for investors, but for every citizen. What kind of Imo State do we want to leave for the next generation? One where every election begins another cycle of starting over? Or one where each administration builds upon the achievements of those before it? One where development depends on individuals? Or one where strong institutions guarantee continuity? One where opportunity is limited? Or one where prosperity becomes increasingly accessible to all? History reminds us that every generation eventually answers these questions. Not with speeches, not with promises, but with actions. The enduring message. The central message of this documentary is simple. Strategic transition is not merely about transferring political authority. It is about preserving momentum. Institutional learning is not merely an academic concept. It is the foundation of better governance. Economic transformation is not achieved through announcements alone. It requires disciplined execution. And lasting prosperity is not built by one administration. It is built when successive generations choose continuity over disruption, learning over repetition, and institutions over personalities. If these principles guide future decision-making, then the ambition of building a stronger, more competitive, and more prosperous Imo State becomes not merely a vision, but an achievable long-term objective. If you found this documentary insightful, share your perspective in the comments. What do you believe should be the highest priority for Imo State's next phase of development? Is it infrastructure, investment, education, technology, institutional reform, economic diversification, or something else entirely? Constructive public dialogue is an important part of building stronger institutions and better public policy.
If you enjoyed this documentary, consider subscribing for more in-depth discussions on governance, economic transformation, public policy, and sustainable development in Nigeria and beyond. Share this video with anyone interested in the future of Imo State. Together, informed conversations can contribute to better ideas and better outcomes. Strategic transition, institutional learning, public policy, economic transformation, investment, execution. These are more than keywords. They are the building blocks of sustainable development. The future of Imo State will ultimately be shaped not only by its abundant resources, but by the quality of its institutions, the consistency of its policies, and the determination of its people to transform opportunity into lasting prosperity. The opportunity exists. The foundation has been laid. The next chapter is waiting to be written. The question is no longer whether Imo State can transform. The question is whether all stakeholders are prepared to build that future together. Thank you for watching.